Alien Earth, Season 1, Episode 7, Emergence. Things are getting very out of hand at the Neverland Research Island, and I'm here to talk about it today with spoilers. I don't know about you, but for me, these last few episodes have been feeling shorter and shorter as we race to the season's conclusion, and it's hard to believe that we're already so close to the end. This episode picks up just about immediately after the events of Episode 6, where Isaac became lunch for the giant flies and Arthur found himself face-hugged inside the lab. Further problems arise, and our characters have to confront difficult realities about the situation, each following through in their own unique ways. It's a pretty wild episode, actually. Certain things happen that you may already be anticipating, but they play out in ways that you might not quite be able to expect. Lots of action here, lots of gruesome alien moments, lots of key plot details that we're hoping to see followed up with as we reach the finale of this season, with this being the penultimate episode. I loved all of the chaos and the bizarre, surreal moments, but with all that, we have to sacrifice a lot of the other stuff this show has been known for in its headier, dialogue-driven, philosophy-spouting scenes. Not too much of that here, but there are some moving character moments that I found worked very nicely. It's funny though, with all this episode has to offer, I didn't find that any of it actually topped last week's episode with the arbitration scene between Cavalere and Yutani. An objectively simple scene, with just two people speaking back and forth across a large table, but so well executed that not even the incredible carnage of aliens loose on an island could compare. I will get into all that. First, though, I wanted to address something about Wendy. In my last review, I had some nitpicks about how the way the powers that be were handling this amazing ability of being able to communicate with the alien. Specifically, I nitpicked that no one was really closely observing these conversations in real time, not getting any translations, and not even just simply asking Wendy what they were talking about. Seeing as how Boy Cavalere was so thrilled at the prospect in the beginning of Episode 4, you'd think that maybe he'd want to follow up, and that he'd want to closely observe these conversations. That didn't seem to be the case, but I guess as we figured out by now, especially with some developments in this episode, Boy K clearly has some kind of attention deficit, and his flights of fancy tend to dart from one incredible scientific possibility to the other. Still, I felt it was important. I felt you could fairly categorize it in the category of characters acting dumb. I actually ended up receiving quite a few comments regarding an interview with Noah Hawley where he revealed that Wendy's ability was really just a glitch of some kind, and she doesn't really understand what the aliens have been saying. Well, I must have missed that interview, but with that being the case, I think it makes my argument even stronger that someone should have been monitoring this. I did track down what I believe to be the interview in question, which was published by Decider shortly after the airing of Episode 4, and this is the exact quote from Hawley. "Nothing is accidental to a kid, right? You know, everything feels meaningful. There's a moment in the 4th hour where she's like, 'They chose me,' right? Which is not true, right? They didn't choose her. She just can hear them because of whatever hardware or software issue that she has." What he's suggesting here is that Wendy wasn't chosen by the aliens to hear them for any special kind of reason, and that it may just be a glitch. However, he doesn't say anywhere here that she actually doesn't understand them, so unless there's a different interview out there, I think it's reasonable enough to say that there is true communication going on between her and the alien, and it isn't just gobbledygook. If that was at all open to interpretation in Episodes 4 and 6, then here in Episode 7, it's just about undeniable, isn't it? And to ease off my own nitpicking, ultimately the reason for keeping Boy K and Kersh and Adam Hines and anyone else out of the details of these conversations is that it simply works better as a storytelling device to keep it away from them, because it keeps it away from us, the audience. If we knew the details of their conversations in the previous episodes, then the surprises in this episode wouldn't work as well. It's important for this narrative to reveal certain things about Wendy as gradually as they possibly can. In Episode 6, we can see a significant change in her perspective. From the first few scenes, we believe she still has faith in Boy Cavalere and the endless possibilities of Neverland in being a yes place, in trying new ideas and making new discoveries. By her final scene, when she shares with Dame Sylvia, she conveys that she's, well, grown up in a way, just as telegraphed by the J.M. Barrie readings. She begins to take control of her own autonomy. She demands to be called Marcy, not Wendy. She lets Sylvia know how much she feels as if she's an experiment being studied, not unlike the xenomorph itself. She has made the decision that the human race is somehow beneath her, and that she is not part of it. As this episode opens, Wendy makes the extent of her powers quite clear, to us, the audience, and to Boy Cavalere. She enters the lab and sees Isaac's body. Something terrible has happened to her kin. Boy K and Kersh try to downplay this as much as they can. They ask for her discretion, but she's not having it. I think it really truly dawns on her for the first time, even with her own brush with death back at the towers, that she is not immortal. Neither are the ones she cares about. That raises serious concerns. She begins to leave, there's an attempt to stop her, but that's when she calls out to another being she's become close to. A friend, apparently, that will follow her commands. This is the xenomorph, which violently knocks its head against the glass of its cage. The reaction from Boyke and Kersh is priceless. They turn their heads in unison, both in disbelief. And Wendy is off, presumably to gather up the rest of the hybrids to tell them the bad news. Not to worry, the boy genius assures his synthetic companion, we can get to them before she does. We can use their trackers, but oops, they're offline. Compliments of Arthur Sylvia. Boyke has officially lost the plot. And you know what? After how smarmy he was in the last episode, it is just a little bit gratifying to see him finally lose his cool here. Wendy is going rogue, and the loss of Toodles is unfortunate. At least monetarily, at least to Cavalere. There goes $6 billion, he says. There is something addressed here that I found myself wondering after the previous episode with these hybrids. Can they really die and it be permanent, or are they backed up in the cloud somehow? That would, after all, be an important feature for anyone who in the future may want to purchase this hybrid technology for themselves. Just like a phone, what if the next updated hybrid body comes along and you want to seamlessly transfer everything over to the new model? Cavalere asks, where are we on reboot and restore? Kersh replies that it's conceptually possible, but practically we haven't cracked it. With this small exchange, I think an important line has been drawn in the sand. Once a hybrid is dead, they stay dead, at least for now. They may introduce something later, maybe if the show goes on for further seasons. If a show like this runs for long enough, such as something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Supernatural, we can see characters dying and coming back to life a number of times. Here with Alien Earth, though, I don't think they're opening up that possibility just yet. As it currently stands, death is permanent. But that's not all. Kersh has the duty to inform Cavalere that Isaac's death wasn't just a freak accident. The T. Ocellus is the culprit. He shows him the security footage, conveniently leaving out anything related to what happened with Slightly, Arthur, and the Facehugger. We also saw Kersh slyly closing the cage with the open xenomorph egg before Cavalere entered the lab. Not that he would notice anyway, because he's so excited by the possibilities of the T. Ocellus that it garners his full attention. He separates it from the lab and has some closer contact with it. He wants to know just how smart it is, and how it can communicate. Well, that's great. You literally had a hybrid that could hold conversations with a never-before-documented alien species, can give it commands, maybe even control it. But now you're interested in what one of these creatures has to say. All of a sudden, the xenomorph is second tier, and you now favor this eyeball creature. I'd pass harsher judgment on that if not for the fact that this does seem to be the collective fan reaction to the series anyway. T. Ocellus has been a runaway success. There's no getting around it. Boyke's theory is that any advanced civilization would be aware of pi, so he writes 3.14 on his palm asking the creature to tell him the next three numbers. Sure, I guess we can go with that. To his utter delight, it does, by stomping its hooves loudly on the ground. If only you could talk, he laments, but the idea then dawns on him. Let's get this thing on a human. Adamine suggests preparing a list of possible employees who could be arranged for such an experiment, but Cavalere says he knows just who to use. This is the last we see of Boyke in the episode, so we're left in suspense as to who that may actually be. Part of me thinks he may want to bring Dame Sylvia to the task. He found out about Arthur disabling the hybrid trackers and believes her to be in cahoots with him. He doesn't trust her. He may as well dispose of her and her services and still get some use out of her in the process. There would be a sense to that narratively, since it was to Dame that he expressed his longing to have an interesting conversation back in episode 2. They could follow up to that in an extremely morbid way if it is Dame Sylvia who becomes host to the image. Then again, he may also want to use Hermit, since everyone seems to view him as a guinea pig, and if he is able to find him before he escapes the island, he could restore some order. At least that way there'll be no more escape attempts, and it would put an end to any of the influence he's been having on Wendy. Plus, he just plain doesn't seem to like him. There's really only so many characters it could be, so I guess we'll be finding out in the next episode. Cavalere may not be aware of just exactly how close Hermit is to escape, though. He comes to see Wendy, and he convinces her that leaving the island is their only option. She in turn convinces him that if that's true, they need to take the other hybrids with them. They find Nibs and Curly. Nibs at this point is severely affected by the memory wipe. She doesn't seem to be quite all there, but she has enough wits about her to know that she doesn't want to stay on this island. She agrees to join Herman and Wendy. Curly, however, does not. Her allegiance remains with Boy Cavalere, though she isn't really the apprentice to the boy genius we are expecting her to be at this point. Now, there were certain things I had said about Curly, specifically regarding her scene in Episode 3, that some felt were offensive and uncalled for. I would say that it was more about me acting in a sporting way, enthusiastically and with exaggeration as a viewer of the show, participating in a way where I expect characters to have ulterior motives and to scheme against each other, to want to pick sides to root for or against certain characters. And that is true in a lot of ways, in other aspects and with other characters, but it doesn't seem to be with Curly. I think I jumped the gun there, all while not really keeping in mind that this is still just a child, and I do apologize if I offended anyone. I think the biggest surprise against any expectations that I had going in with Curly is that she isn't some evil, treacherous character. At least she doesn't seem to be, not in these moments, though events may change her in the future. But she's just like any of the other Lost Boys. She's still a child at the end of it all. She's still figuring things out. She's vulnerable. She looks at someone like Boy K and she finds him to be an inspirational figure, and why shouldn't she? Her life was extremely difficult before this transformation. She mentions in the first episode that even before she got very seriously sick, she was always sick. Why wouldn't she want to emulate someone she believes to stand for good and to give someone like her a completely new lease on life? Those feelings of admiration may come into question now, but how she reacts to it all and everything that is so overwhelming is just the way a child would act. She's upset, she's scared, and she needs comfort. She looks to Dame Sylvia, and we have this great scene where they're together. It's a true maternal moment, with Sylvia embracing her child and telling her everything's going to be okay. Once again, I have to applaud the series for finding a way to include scenes such as this that really take you off guard and truly give off the desire to explore the humanity in this world that would, despite everything, be worth fighting for. That, I think, above all else, is extremely important. Curly stays. Wendy, Nibs, and Hermit make for their escape, but the other two are not accounted for. That would be Slightly and Smee, who have their own little adventure throughout this episode. I also said some things about those two characters, also in Episode 3, about them acting like annoying kids and that whole aspect being taken too far, but I think it's fair to say their childlike innocence has been swiftly extinguished. They're dealing with the harsh trials of adulthood and the horrors that no one of any age should behold. Slightly is scared, alone in his room. Well, he's not really alone, and maybe that's the problem. Like a child may do, he hides his shame under the bed, hoping for no one to discover it. There is where we find Arthur, with the alien parasite firmly attached to his face. This is the telltale heart moment of the show. Slightly hears the horrible noises of the facehugger, and he can't ignore them. We've never heard too much of facehugger noises before, aside from their little screeches when they jump, so this is somewhat unique to the show. It's this deep, gurgling, groaning sound. But you may wonder if this is all from Slightly's perspective and in his head, or maybe because he has advanced hearing as a hybrid. He doesn't look to be getting himself together to accomplish this terrible mission until Smee happens to knock on the door and eventually forces himself in to discover the shocking secret inside Slightly's room. This all changes the dynamic between Slightly and Smee very quickly. Ever since Episode 3, with Slightly becoming Morrow's mole inside the Neverland facility, the two kids were starting to drift apart. Slightly was understandably distracted by all of this, and was distancing himself. Smee had no idea, but sensed something must have been bothering his friend, and not really having much within his own social maturity to deal with that or to help. They both attributed to it just being hard growing up, being adults, and neither really understanding the gravity of the situation. In this episode, they come together, and there's a resolution to that, but it's at a high cost. Slightly is able to convince me to help him get Arthur and the parasite attached to the rendezvous point at the island's beach. It looks like their journey is going to come to a very abrupt end when they run into Kersh, who sees exactly what they are doing, which no lie is possibly going to cover up. So, Slightly is honest. He tells Kersh the man from the ship wanted him to bring Arthur to the beach. Kersh, to Slightly's surprise and relief, tells him he already knows that. In another surprise, Kersh does nothing to stop them. In fact, he opens up the secure elevator for them, tells them the exact floor to get off, and lets them walk right out. Yet again, we wonder just what Kersh must be planning, and whose side does he belong to? One thing I'll say I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt is that there would have been absolutely no way those two hybrid kids could have been able to make it to the beach in the first place without Kersh's help. There's just no way they would have gotten lost or caught, and it was not sheer coincidence that Kersh encountered them when he did. He wanted this to happen. I'd even say he wanted them to fail, which they do, and he wanted them and the specimen brought back to him, which is what happens at the end of this episode. The only question is why. I don't know if it's as simple as having to circumvent whatever programming he may have to not bring harm to humans with his xenomorph experiments. He was able to use a lung the first time around and not directly harm a human. Now he's using a competitor cyborg and 2 hybrids in order to achieve this, and not get his own hands dirty. That way he can get his specimens. It seems very complicated to achieve just that, but with Kersh being the make and model he is, he may have to get a little creative. He had told Morrow in the elevator last episode that the cyborg must envy a complete and total synth. They talked about death and of killing. For Kersh, of course, that's only in theory. He cannot kill. His programming could not allow such a thing. There's a truth to Morrow calling him an old toy, because as advanced as he may believe himself to be, he is very limited, and maybe he's really the one who envies the cyborg. The ability to create must feel just a little lacking without the ability to kill. I don't think it has anything to do with the corporate conflicts. I don't think he's been secretly working for Weyland-Yutani or anything like that. Whatever Kersh has going on, I think it's ultimately for some deeply personal, even petty reasons. Slightly, Smee and Arthur make their way through the island on their way to the beach, and there is an alarming moment when the hybrids believe they've somehow lost Arthur. Some of the armed security marches by, they set Arthur down, hide in the grass, and when they come back, he's nowhere to be found. They find the facehugger, it's dead and detached from its host, but no sign of the host. Then Arthur appears as if out of thin air, shocking the boys, and he appears fine. He has no memory of the last few hours. This is an effect we've seen since the original Alien film where Kane awakes with no recollection of the events on LV-426, only remembering some horrible dream about smothering. Going back to something I brought up in my review for Episode 3, this is another element of the xenomorph embryo implantation process that was described directly in Aliens magazine. Specifically, Jim Campbell's Under the Knife series of articles written from the perspective of scientific reports by LaSalle bionational scientists. In the article titled Cyanide Kiss, we have an explanation for the host's loss of memory. Utilizing a secretion of its acidic compounds to penetrate exceptionally resilient hides or armor, it then uses a DMSO-delivered cyanose-based toxin in concentrations relative to the optimum size of the host in order to render a case of deep toxic shock. One of the side effects of etamethyl sulfoxide exposure is the loss of memory and confusion, which explains why a xenomorph host may never recall being implanted in the first place. This, I feel, is a very important detail in what makes the alien the perfect organism. Such an ability aids significantly in the species' propagation. A human can be attacked by the facehugger parasite, wake up later with no memory of it, all the while they show absolutely no signs of any kind of infection. They can move amongst other potential hosts. They can travel. Depending on the time it may take before the alien bursts from its victim, which can vary quite a bit, these things can spread all over a planet with ease. And I think that's part of the reason fans get a little touchy about alien prequel stories being set on Earth in the first place. How many isolated trillionaire research islands or isolated pyramids in Antarctica can they really come up with before it's unjustifiable? Maybe the series will continue and we'll find that out. This is the 7th episode, the 7th hour of Alien Earth, and up until now we have not had a chestburster. We've seen the aftermath, the bloody cryopod from the Maginot in a few episodes. We've even had the alien, Wendy's friend, grow inside and burst out of a lung in stasis. But as of yet, we have not had the good old-fashioned alien bursting out of a victim's chest in a bloody, horrifying display. We were probably due by this point. It's something you would just naturally expect within an alien show or movie. Showrunner Noah Hawley wisely saves it for a while. The entire series isn't wall-to-wall chestbursters, which I appreciate. And here we're able to focus on the emotional core to the scene and its consequences rather than rely on the surprise of an alien ripping out of someone's body. We already know that's coming, and our knowledge of that is used to get the appropriate emotional payoff in this scene. When Arthur is up and walking and talking again, we know we're looking at a dead man. It's only a matter of time. It is actually kind of heartbreaking, and it's delightfully cruel the way we see Arthur being so nurturing, so caring, so reassuring to these boys when we are certain that we're just moments away from the horror. He has his own paternal moment with the hybrids. He gives them a little speech about the importance of telling the truth and that things will be okay if you're just honest and confront what's troubling you. So if the metaphors get mixed up just a little bit, we have a Pinocchio-esque moment this time around. Geppetto and his real boys. They walk hand in hand on the beach. We're reminded of Maro's memories with his daughter. Then, the change in the eyes, the fear, the pain, the realization that something is not right and it's very serious. Our new chestburster is born. I'd say it's a good moment. I don't think anything will ever really top the original film, or even the second film, which had a pretty scary chestburster scene, but you like to see how it can be done a little differently each time. Personally, I feel they don't need to edit in the exact same sound bites of the chestburster from the 1979 film. I think it works fine without adding it in, and it should stay there. I don't think they needed to add it in this time around, but it was a nice vault of quick chaos. Decent on the gore aspect, but not over the top with it either. I think David Risdall, playing Arthur, sells it very well. It was good. True enough to the nymph stage of the xenomorph, the little snake-like version of the creature scuttles away into the grass with great speed. Slightly and Smee have lost their specimen, but it doesn't stop Slightly's determination. In his mind, if he delivers Arthur, he has stayed true to his end of the deal. If there's an alien creature scurrying around the island somewhere, it's not his responsibility to find it and to catch it. But actually, at this point, there are 2 of these alien creatures now loose on the island. Just before leaving with Nibs, Wendy worked her special abilities through the lab's computer system and opened up the cage containing her friend. That xenomorph ran amok, and now it would seem that it has been even following Wendy this entire time while she, Nibs, and Hermit make their way to the boat. If it all goes beyond just noise, just language, then maybe she can even sense when it's nearby too. The trio is stopped in their tracks by security forces, and they have them in an unwinnable situation. Their weapons are locked, and they're not afraid of Nibs gnashing her teeth in a threatening manner. Though they're not unafraid of that either. Wendy warns the soldiers, telling them to leave. They refuse, and we know what's coming. She calls out to her xenomorph friend, and that is when we see some of the bloody carnage that she's able to unleash. It tears through the soldiers like nothing, sending limbs and bodies in all directions. When it's all over, which is very quickly, and the enemies are killed, it makes its way to Wendy. This is the big moment of the episode. They draw in closer. Wendy reaches out. There's some awe to it. It's a reflection of the scene at the end of episode 4 when it was first born. But there's surely some tension there too. Who knows when this creature might switch gears and attack? If not the 2 hybrids, then at least Hermit. But it does not. Wendy gently caresses the alien on the head. In their shared language, she tells it, hide and follow. At least she says that's what she thinks she told it. I can see this being a divisive scene for fans. Some may say, well, here we go, we've reached the training raptors era of Alien, God help us all, sure. But I'll say this, we have Weyland-Yutani still standing, still controlling, decades after the events taking place within this series. They've always wanted the alien, and they've specifically wanted it for their bioweapons division. I would think that, if somewhere in the past there is some documentation, or even rumors, that these creatures can be controlled, that would be of great interest to them. That kind of potential may be worth them pursuing it for so long. Not that it could ever possibly end well. And of course, there is precedent to something like this. Many have seen a similarity to Wendy and one of the characters introduced to the Dark Horse comics, Eloise. This unique addition to the series was a character brought to life using android biotech and alien queen DNA. Half alien, half android. She lived among a hive of aliens on a remote research planet. She could communicate with them, not through sound or language, but through telepathy. It was not just the ability to communicate, but it was a true connection in every sense. She could hear the hive's thoughts and feel its feelings. Not only could she control her xenomorph brood to attack, but she would join in, along with them, possessing a primal ferocity of her own. It should be noted, though, that while Eloise is undoubtedly a fascinating character, she was never front and center on the Dark Horse line. She never really had a large story arc or never graced any covers. Arguably, it's more of an obscure character, really only appearing in 2 stories overall throughout Dark Horse's 3-decade run. It's certainly possible that Noah Hawley may have been aware of the character, but I think it's also just as likely they could be somewhat similar characters just by coincidence. If he had taken any influence from Eloise, Hawley does not make mention of it. In another interview published with Howley after this episode's airing, this time with The Hollywood Reporter, he had a fair amount to say about this scene. The interview was conducted by James Hibbard, who asked the following. Now we know from James Cameron's Aliens that xenomorphs can communicate with each other. And if they can communicate, then the next iteration of that idea would be someone not of their species attempting to communicate with them. I assume that's the inspiration for Wendy's relationship with the xenomorph, but isn't it always a bit of a risk when you take the scary monster and turn them into something that seems domesticated? Hawley's answer. There are a couple of things. Obviously, there's that moment in Cameron's film where the Queen communicates with the drone. Is that a pheromone? Is it telekinetic? Is that a frequency we can't hear? We don't know, but that always seemed like really interesting as something to explore. The other thing, of course, is that an alien movie is a 2-hour survival story, and a television show has to be an ongoing series. You have to use the monsters in a different way. You certainly want to use them in the classic way, but you also have to figure out how to sustain having monsters in your show when the reality is they would kill everyone, or that you would kill them, and then that would be it. Bringing in other creatures allowed me to take the pressure off the xenomorphs to fill that void. There's also this idea of the hubris of people, that classic Jurassic Park thing of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, and the naivete of children as well. There's a romanticism that can happen in kids. She wants to believe that it's not these creatures' fault, that they didn't ask to come here, and we shouldn't experiment on them the way that she's being experimented on. You can understand the rationale, but it doesn't make it safe to make friends with one. One of the big question marks was if fans were going to go with this idea. I don't want her to have a xenomorph as a pet, but it seems like an alliance has been struck. What are the interesting possibilities that we can pull out of that? And because this is a horror story, we have to assume that, ultimately, I wouldn't bet on this working out. Hibbard also had some curiosities about Kersh, as we all do, and he asked this. Timothy Olyphant seems to steal every moment he's on screen. And maybe this question is too much of a spoiler that you won't want to get into, but I'm constantly wondering, what does Kersh want? Yeah, that's interesting to me. And the question of how much is he in control? What are the rules of his programming? Part of what I feel made Ian Holmes' alien android character Ash crazy at the end of that movie was that he had this countermanding programming. The crew's lives were expendable, but somewhere in there he had been programmed to protect human life. Those two conflicting impulses caused him to malfunction. I think with Tim, there's definitely this question of how much is he autonomous? How much is he controlled by the programming, and how much is his sense of identity? If he is a scientist and experimenting, he doesn't seem to have the human morality that others have. He's probably programmed that he can't harm Boy Cavalere, Samuel Blenkin. He may be programmed that he really shouldn't disagree with him, or argue with him. And in these moments where Boy Cavalere is super patronizing and dismissive, may have been programmed to smile and bear it. And yet, is he done? Some stuff to chew on, but ultimately a non-answer. He's not giving away too much about Kersh, not yet, and I even wonder how much we'll really end up knowing by the time we get to the season finale. If all of this were a part of his design, his own planning, then by the end of this episode, things have gone just about perfectly for him. Not only was the new chestburster alone on this giant island, which could have been hiding anywhere, miraculously caught by Prodigy, but yet again they got a one-up on Weyland-Yutani. Slightly and Smee did reach the rendezvous point to meet with Morrow, but he was not alone and brought a team of Weyland-Yutani Black Ops soldiers with him. They held the two hybrids hostage, but only momentarily. Once they found themselves facing off against Prodigy, it was pretty much game over. Outgunned, outmanned, not in any bargaining position despite holding a gun right to the head of a $6 billion prototype. Before being taken away, Morrow declares, "This isn't over." Kersh agrees. "Nothing ever is," he says. As the episode ends, Hermit, Wendy, and Nibs have found the boat to make their escape. Considering how careless Hermit has been in letting everyone know about his plans, he probably shouldn't be too surprised to see his Prodigy co-workers waiting there in anticipation for exactly this. But here we are. We're expecting another scene of the Xenomorph slaughtering a bunch of soldiers, but Hermit prevents Wendy from calling out. He has to be a little more tactful in this situation. After all, Siberian and Rashidi are still his friends, and even with a mild betrayal like that, he wouldn't want them to be ripped apart by an alien. Instead of the Xenomorph attacking, though, it's Nibs who goes haywire, perhaps even having been inspired by the alien's earlier display of power. She rips one of the soldiers' lower jaw clean off, sends others flying off the boat, when he joins in on the fight. But when Siberian is in harm's way, Hermit makes the decision to fire off an electric jolt straight into Nibs, which incapacitates her. Wendy is shocked too, but only emotionally. She can't believe what her brother just did. She literally yells at him, "What did you do?" The armed soldiers advance. This time on the soundtrack, it's Queens of the Stone Age. The scene was very quick, disorienting, and probably could have used an action director. Episode 7 has ended. Just one more to go. I think it could make all the difference. Emergence may actually fall just a little bit lower in my personal favorite episodes of the series so far. I think I had really big expectations at the end of episode 6, which this one didn't quite meet. I was expecting hell to rain down, but maybe we're not quite there just yet. That could be episode 8. To its credit, I really don't know where this one will be going next, and I'm eagerly anticipating the finale. We had some big moments here. Some of them worked very well, some didn't quite land, but it was just altogether a little bit different than what I was expecting. But I did like that surprise element. It is different. We have no dark corridors, no claustrophobic confined spaces that we're so accustomed to with the Alien series. With this episode, all the action is out in the open, in wide spaces, in daylight. Very unexpected, and I applaud them for taking a big swing like that. However, I think it's time we talk about the suit work again. I know, in my very first review of Episode 1, I made a sort of promise to myself, and to anyone watching these reviews, that I wouldn't be harping on it each and every week. I said my piece, I got it all off my chest, and that was enough for me. But to be fair, I did say I wouldn't bring it up again unless there was something that especially bugged me, and I think it's warranted here. With everything out in the open and in broad daylight, the man in a suit effect has never been as exposed as it is here. It's almost to a point where you're looking at this thing and you can't help but think, this is just a really good alien costume. But I'm not necessarily believing it's an actual alien on screen. The illusion is broken, and they try their best to maintain that illusion. The shots are very, very quick. Some are even far away and out of focus. You see it hidden behind the leaves. But then you see a shot such as the one as the alien leaping from the trees and onto the soldier, which is admittedly an impressive shot, with really just one cut there, and clearly this is an elaborate stunt, but it's just that it's incomplete as far as I'm concerned. No literal seams are showing, but you very much feel the figurative ones. It's a very serious problem with the show. If I were someone in a position of power behind the scenes, judging where the money goes and how it should be spent, honestly, I'd be looking at so much of this footage and saying, this is just unacceptable. We need to replace this with CGI. And hey, I love practical effects. I think they can be used to great effect in unison with CGI, but a guy in a suit is a guy in a suit. A guy in a suit shown with this much clarity is Halloween afternoon. It's no good. That's my stance. May they do better. How did you feel about Alien Earth Season 1, Episode 7, Emergence? Where do you think we'll be going with the season finale? Share your thoughts and your predictions in the comments below. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest from Alien Theory. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Butta, our Weyland-Yutani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. Thank you very much to Ben Katz, the Patreon Hive's queen. And a very special thanks, as always, to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. You can also follow me on social media. Follow @alien_theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.